So hey, how about that new Metroid Prime 4 trailer? Yeah, no release date makes me want to scream into my pillow, but did you guys see the part where Samus Beak Aran uses psychic powers like Mewtwo? Anyway, I wanted to do a bit of a scripted analysis video on the new trailer. Plenty of other Metroid fans have gotten in on that content mill, but I have the benefit of being a complete lunatic and obsessive fanboy, so my insights will naturally be superior to the hoi polloi. Also, I wanted to do one for the original trailer as well as some story theories, but the original trailer was so devoid of specifics besides Silux is here and Wyatt makes a soy face that I needed something more substantial. I won't go frame by frame, but I'll start by giving my overall thoughts on what I see before delving into the true goodness. That is, the psychosis of me making theories and predictions based on almost literally nothing. Of course, the moment I saw that cliffside fade in from the black, I knew it was Prime 4 and reacted accordingly with ape noises. Oh, here it is! Woo! The environment of Euros, the new planet, while being very similar to Talon Overworld or Torvus Bog, feels like the first real attempt at a forest area in a Prime game. Definitely huge Metroid Dread Gavarin vibes from what I've seen, and hey, I fucking love Gavarin. It's like the channel's mascot in a way, because I use it in the backgrounds of all my videos. I already felt this from the first trailer, but the level of style and detail in this game is mind-boggling. Now, we heard a small clip of the area music in the previous trailer, and boy howdy did I have that 20-second clip on repeat more times than I can count. Right there, I could tell that they nailed the vibe of Prime 1 and 2. Hearing the full song and then a few more snippets just continued to prove that this game has the fucking sauce after how sauceless Dread felt. Not to dogpile on poor Dread, but even its absolute best music like the Upper Berenia theme is like solidly good. Most of the time it's mid, sometimes it's kind of fucking bad like in Ferenia. By the way, does it annoy anyone else that they have an area named Burenia and Ferenia? I don't know, maybe it has similar etymologies in Chozo. Needless to say, the full forest theme made me literally cry real tears from my adult eyes when I heard it. You can find the full clean rip of it on YouTube if you're curious. Not to mention the badass electric distortion guitars when fighting these freaky little guys in the woods. I'm sorry, I meant abhorrent alien creatures living in the jungle.
Abhorrent alien creatures living in the jungle.
God, why is the narrator so intense?
There's actually 3 genders. The third one is Little Funny Bunny Rabbit.
Anyway, I don't know if Yamamoto is back in full force as the composer or somebody just nailed his style, but I love it so far. Definitely a return to form after the still excellent but more elevated and epic operatic music from Prime 3. This feels very in line with Prime 1 and 2 with the more pulpy sci-fi vibe. Here's something I noticed immediately that made more sense in the context of the rest trailer. Why she Orpal? Samus has a gem embedded in her forehead and all the light piping on her suit has changed from green to purple. Of course, like any good sci-fi, we can all agree that the universal color for psychic abilities is a pinkish purple color. I kind of assumed something space-timey was going on with her powers from that initial shot of her at the start of the trailer. The gem obviously resembles a third eye, and the architecture of Euros has a lot of eye or mandala imagery. Some say it's a little Yonik, if you catch my drift, and hey, I would love for this game to just go for it and be true to its Metroid origins with its themes of motherhood in some way, but I'm gonna assume all of these oval shapes are meant to be like eyes. Anyway, psychic abilities. You seen this shit, dude? She can grab and throw things, move objects. She can use the Sokidon from Dragon Ball to kill a bunch of enemies at once. This definitely gives me the vibe that combat is gonna be a much bigger focus in this game, with the new psychic abilities opening up new options and thus scaling the enemy encounters accordingly as you progress through the game. I don't need intense combat in Metroid. Even in Dread, I just prefer moving around and exploring, but I hope it's a step up from Prime 3 in that regard. That game had some really, really great battles and bosses that were almost completely ruined by hyper mode. On later difficulties, they managed to make it a bit better, but it's still so reliant on hyper mode, and it's such a static power that you are basically doing the same shit at the end as you were doing at the start. I could see counters, dodging, stunning, all sorts of stuff being linked to psychic abilities. Also, it seems like the omnidirectional bullet thing goes off of a meter or potentially an ammo source, judging by this shot in the trailer. Check out my video on Metroid and ammo, by the way. It's a good one, like all my videos are. Halfway through, we see one of the aliens on the planet, the Lemorn. We've seen statues of these guys earlier in the trailer, and these freaky monsters in the woods look suspiciously similar to them, which we will get to, don't you worry. But now we get a genuine article. Obviously, my mind goes to Prime 2, where you're given direction by Umos, though this area is pretty reminiscent of the temple interiors of Prime 2 and the holograms of the Luminoth Sentinels. I have no idea if this guy is a ghost, a hologram, or just glowy, but we shall see. Either way, I'm always gonna pog my balls off at a new lore guy in Metroid. Prime 3 was sadly lacking a huge presence from lore guys. Brio was pretty good about it with the Reptilicus, and I always felt like their story was super interesting, awesome, and very tragic, and their planet and the Mesoamerican inspired architecture was all very cool. But they are sort of lost in the shuffle thanks to that game's focus on the overall plot of Phazon and the Space Pirates that ends up having very little to do with the planet's lore. This time, I predict the lore guys, Silux, and the Space Pirates are all much more connected than it seems. The Lemorn seem to be axolotls and have a gemstone in their forehead for psychic shenanigans as well. Them being axolotls is very interesting. It should be noted though that normally they're found in or around water, and while this is a rainforest presumably, it's not submerged like Torvus Bog was. Makes me curious if they have more civilization underwater, since they'd be amphibians if they were axolotls. An underwater ruins or city is one of my dream locations in Metroid. Not just like a place to explore underwater like a cave, but basically take Choso Ruins and put it underwater. Or, even better, some kind of active, super advanced Atlantis zone. So like, take Sanctuary Fortress and put it underwater. Probably the last big talking point in the new trailer that isn't that sexy as hell suit is that we see the Metroids. You know, the guys the game series is named after. They really barely had anything to do with the other games in the trilogy, only really being the confusing namesake of the titular Metroid Prime. So it's nice to see that they are the major threat again for the first time since, shit, I don't know, Super Metroid? I can only speculate what the hell is going on, but the weird looking Metroids, which I'm going to assume are not Machtroids like everybody else is assuming, can meld with organic creatures. We see it fusing with a pirate, we see one fused with an early plant boss, and can I just say, my eyes shot open when I saw this. I was kind of speechless in my reaction because I had been really hoping that they would lead into the Metroids are the ultimate bioweapon angle again. In specific, it really reminds me of the scrapped idea of the Metroid from some early concept art for Prime 2. Metroids are such interesting creatures. They mix science with magic and the unknown, and they feel so weirdly underutilized in their own series. With the main games seemingly closing the book on them forever with Dread, it's great to have a game take place before Return of Samus again, so we can explore them more on a deeper level. Alright, time for the fun part, theories and speculation. Firstly, gotta give a shout out to me for the very obvious in hindsight observation that the combination of the purple logo and the giant purple energy beams being shot at the start of the first trailer meant that some new purple power source was discovered by the pirates after they lost access to Phazon. We can assume that they have access to the psychic motes somehow, and we can also assume that the device we see the feds wheeling away and that's in the logo is of Lemorn origin. I think some accident or explosion at the beginning of the game, possibly an intentional event involving this device, ends up embedding a shard of crystal into Samus's skull and she's flung into a portal and to Viros. Now, it's possible Samus was sent through a portal from one planet to another, but I do not think so. I think that desolate wasteland in the original trailer and the, what the fuck does this guy say? Verdant jungle with a colossal tree at its center are the same planet. The threads intertwined between space and time are beginning to weave a new tale after all. Space, that's easy. Telekinesis and mind reading and being in touch with the cosmos is all about manipulating space. It was a popular theory though for the first trailer, and I think it's going to be true, that these blue portals are time related. What the hell does time travel have to do with Silex and the Space Pirates and Metroids? Well, I don't know, but I can guess. Basically, the only thing we know about Silex is that he hates the feds and hates Samus for being a bootlicker. I have felt this for a while, like well before we even saw the game at all. I didn't even know that Silex was 100% in it, but I think Silex is attacking the base because it's on his home planet. Does that make him a Lemorne? Possibly, but I think there's another option that we'll get to in a second. I think it's possible that something really bad happened on Viros, killed the giant world tree, and turned the planet into a wasteland. I don't necessarily think the feds are responsible for this, but I think Silex is disgusted either by their lack of action or their crass exploitation of the gravesite of his ancestral home, using it as a research base. And I was only like 80% sure that this was the case after the first trailer, but this trailer plus this key art depicting the Lemorne and their statues above the barren desert below, I think the implication is clear as day now. I'll be genuinely shocked if these are not the same planet. So I believe that Silex is trying to employ some kind of plan that involves going back in time and stopping whatever catastrophe ended up turning this planet into that planet. But let's look closely at this art again. First of all, goat raw fire and peak fiction, but secondly, what are these other statues? They don't look Lemorne to me. They don't even look organic. Now, we've seen depictions of armored people before. There's plenty of Chozo statues with power suits, and judging by the end of the trailer, it's possible that the Lemorne have some Chozo or Chozo-like technology, that they're able to upgrade Samus's suit, but I think it could be robotic guardians, something very similar to the Moganar statues on Brio. The Reptilicus use their primal magic to control the titanic golems, and I could see the Lemorne doing the same thing with psychic powers and such, especially given the fact we've already seen some uses of psychic to roll the clip, operate mechanisms, and open doors. Speaking of similarities between Brio and Viros, let's finally talk about these guys. I've seen a lot of people already compare them to the feral Reptilicus, and even I drew the connection. After seeing the first Lemorne statue, I figured, in typical Metroid form, the lore guys were all dead and gone. When I saw these freaks, I assumed that they were some sort of corrupted version of the Lemorne, a la the Chozo Ghosts, or of course the Reptilicus in Prime 3. God, I'm saying Reptilicus a lot here. Anyway, while we eventually see the true blue Lemorne later in the trailer, I still think these guys gotta be connected to them somehow. I mean, come on, they both have forearms, they both have tendrils on their head, similar to an axolotl, and they both have very similar size and silhouettes, the biggest difference being the lack of eyes and the lack of a forehead gem. So my theory at the moment is that this is what Lemorne naturally look and act like, and the psychic motes on their head have sort of evolved them into intelligent beings. I could see the meddlesome Chozo sticking their beaks into this planet's business, maybe using a natural resource to aid the burgeoning population. Then, at the point in time that Samus travels back to, that we're playing in the game, some decline has begun and the crystals are shattering or being removed for some reason, causing the Lemorne to become feral once again. I do think, at least, it's pretty likely that there's some reason they chose to make them look that way. Whether you travel undersea or not is to be determined, whether that has any bearing on the world or story, or even if these two creatures are related at all, other than wouldn't it be cool if that were the case, remains to be seen, but it would be cool, so they should do it. And I guess my last theory is a simple one regarding the new suit. Given the shape of the helmet, I think it's easy to assume that the suit is meant to enhance psychic abilities. To what degree? I have no idea, but I'll get into some predictions for new power-ups and such in a second here. It's a pretty cool suit. Not my favorite ever, but I'm always excited for a new Samus suit, especially one that's not just power vary at gravity. I think my only guess or question at this point is that the room with the upgrade and the suit itself looks way more advanced than any architecture we've seen on Viros up until this point. I still think it's on Viros and not another planet, and I also think it's probably just more modern Lamorne tech, but there is also the chance that it's something else. Maybe these Sentinels in the key art aren't Lamorne or robots, but a different race that is mixed up with the goings-on of this planet for some reason. The only thing holding me back from committing to that theory is that the room she gets the suit in still looks reminiscent of Lamorne architecture. It's just much darker, probably underground, and more advanced. Kind of like how ZDR looks way more advanced than Zebes, despite the fact that both are colonized and populated by Chozo. Alright, time for some last predictions, most of which are based on nothing but vibes. I already peppered in a few in the last sections, like Silex being related to the Lamorne and the Metroids being a major factor in the story, possibly continuing into the next trilogy of games if they so choose. As far as other story points go, it'd be really cool if there was some twist to the Chosen One prophecy. I could easily see it being very straightforward, but I think after how almost cool but woefully underutilized Quiet Robe was as an ally in Metroid Dread, I want to see this lore guy be more than just a nice Umos again. No shade to Umos, I love that guy, but especially if there ends up being a sympathetic angle with Silex, I could see it conflicting with the prophecy, making Samus doubt herself, maybe making the lore guy take action and force the prophecy to come true to preserve the timeline or whatever. Basically, as much as I'm dying to see a grudge match with Silex, I'd also love to see a big-ass, balls-out psychic showdown with some master psychic guy as the final boss. Maybe even have the Meldroids be involved in some way. As for areas I want to see, I'd love something a little more interesting than the fire area, the ice area, evil lab, etc. I already shouted out underwater city/ruins, but I'd love to be surprised by a theme I've never thought of, like the digital theme of Sanctuary Fortress. I'm willing to explore whatever though. It's been so goddamn long since the last Prime game that I was even eating up the crumbs of world building we got in Federation Force. Oh, the Bion are snake guys that somehow constructed armor and they all worship balls? Cool. Whatever. Feed me the lore slop, please. Needless to say, I'm gonna walk as slowly as possible and scan every fucking inch of Prime 4 when I get my grubby hands on it, whatever that release date is. As far as things like gameplay and movement go, I really don't expect like Titanfall 2 like a lot of people seem to want. I am totally fine with just chilling the hell out and soaking in the vibes. I also don't really care about Prime 1 and 2 style beam switching being a thing. I think it left a lot to be desired in those games, and I just vastly prefer it in the 2D games in Prime 3, where the stacking beams give you a sense of progression and power. Speaking of movement though, I do hope we get some cool new movement options with the psychic abilities. I mentioned before how it could affect combat, but levitating for a short time like Silver the Hedgehog to cross gaps or reach higher ledges could be a more elegant solution than that shitty-ass screw attack in Prime 2 and 3. They really massacred my boy in recent years. The screw attack hasn't been good since Zero Mission. In one thing, I think the time powers might not be solely relegated to the portals. Something like a time beam that's like a fusion between the ice beam and the stasis from Breath of the Wild, I could see 100% being a thing in combat. Not gonna lie, I was already out of my mind excited for the game just on the basis of it existing at all and that I saw it with my eyes, but this new trailer really got my mind racing about the potential this game has, and it still feels like just the tip of the iceberg. Even if my more lofty predictions don't come true, I have no doubt that Retro still has their sauce, and we're gonna be delivered a generational game here soon. Maybe even better than Dread was for me if they play their cards right. Well, only a few days until that Switch 2 Direct, so we'll see if it shows up there or not again. Maybe I'll be back with another video sooner rather than later.